When you break an arm, the whole diagnostic process is just, it's incredibly straightforward.
Right. Yeah. You just get an X-ray.
Exactly. You get an X-ray, and it reveals this clean, jagged white line. It is entirely binary. I mean, the bone is broken or it isn't.
Yeah. There's no ambiguity there.
But when you step into the world of daily chronic symptoms, the kind that really start creeping up on us in our 50s and 60s, there is no X-ray for that, ambient discomfort.
Absolutely. It's much more insidious.
Right. You are just going about your day, and maybe you feel this transient wave of dizziness when you stand up from the couch, or you're lying in bed, and your feet are just freezing cold.
Paddle feet. Yeah.
And they stay that way regardless of how many layers of socks you put on them.
Or consider that that very specific sensation by late afternoon where your legs just feel profoundly heavy.
Yes. Not tired, right? Just heavy.
Exactly. Not tired from a workout or exertion, but physically heavy, almost like the tissue itself has suddenly become denser.
And then parallel to all that cardiovascular sluggishness, you have the gastrointestinal distress. You finish a moderate, totally normal meal, and, within an hour, your abdomen is just distended.
The stubborn belly bloat.
Right. You're dealing with that bloat, a major slowing of transit time, and that pervasive feeling that your digestion has, simply stalled.
Yeah, it just stops working efficiently.
And the societal reflex, and honestly, often the clinical reflex too, is to just categorize all of this under a single dismissive umbrella.
Yeah.
We just call it the inevitable tax of aging.
We normalize it.
Perfectly normalize it.
Which is, frankly, a fundamental diagnostic failure. I mean, the literature we are looking at today for this deep dive frames these symptoms not as some natural biological decline, but as a series of urgent, highly specific alarms.
Alarms that your body is physically sounding.
Yeah, precisely. The cold feet, the cognitive fog when you stand up, the delayed gastric empty, these are mechanical failures. Your body is broadcasting that the internal pipelines, meaning both the vascular highways and the digestive tract, are actively losing their structural integrity.
And their lubrication, right?
Yes, exactly. They're drying out and getting stiff.
And that brings us to the core mission for this deep dive. For decades, the prevailing advice for maintaining these systems, especially the heart and the arteries, was built on this incredibly rigid framework, which is the dietary fat is the ultimate enemy.
A low-fat craze.
Right. But today, we are unpacking a really fascinating stack of recent clinical research, expansive meta-analyses, and data from preventative cardiology and gastroenterology that entirely upends that framework.
It completely flips the script.
It really does. The data demonstrates that specific cold-pressed kitchen oils are not the cause of the plaque or the sluggishness. They're actually the therapeutic interventions required to reverse them.
And the scope of the sources we are synthesizing today is substantial. We're talking about controlled nutritional trials from the University of São Paulo, the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro.
The University of Toronto is in there too, right?
Yeah, Toronto, and of course the monumental Predimed study out of Spain. The objective here is to isolate the exact molecular pathways that certain lipids activate.
Okay, let's unpack this. We want to fundamentally change how you look at the fats in your pantry. We are looking at how specific fatty acids and their accompanying polyphenols can actually clear calcified arterial plaque
and restore elasticity to the vascular wall while reestablishing the mucosal lining of the intestinal tract. It's doing double duty.
Right. But to understand the intervention, I think we first have to establish the pathology. We have to look at what is actively failing inside the tissue when someone experiences, say, that heaviness in their legs.
Right, the root cause.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that leads us directly to the cardiovascular highway, and more specifically, a term we need to define, the endothelium.
Right. The endothelium is essentially the biological ground zero for systemic circulation issues. It is a single layer of squamous endothelial cells.
And that lines everything right.
Exactly. It lines the interior surface of every single blood vessel in the human body.
I think a lot of people visualize their arteries as rigid plumbing.
Yeah.
Like PVC pipes carrying fluid through the walls of a house.
Which is totally inaccurate biologically.
Right. A much more accurate mechanical analogy would be a living, highly sensitive garden hose. If you leave a garden hose out in the harsh sun all summer, the inner rubber lining gets irritated.
It dries out.
It loses its suppleness. It becomes stiff, brittle, and develops these microscopic fissures. And when your arterial lining undergoes that kind of degradation, It loses its ability to dynamically expand and contract.
Which is a huge problem because it has to respond to your body's oxygen demands. If you walk up a flight of stairs, those vessels need to widen immediately.
Right, and that dynamic expansion is critical.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it is governed by the endothelium's primary function. It's not just this passive nonstick Teflon coating for blood to slide over.
It's an active organ.
Yes, the endothelium is the largest active endocrine organ in the human body, and its most crucial job is the continuous synthesis and release of a tiny gas-signaling molecule called nitric oxide.
Nitric oxide, that's the magic word here. It is essentially the chemical command signal that tells the smooth muscle tissue surrounding the blood vessel to relax.
Which then dilates the physical diameter of the artery. That is the fundamental mechanism of healthy blood flow.
But the clinical crisis we face, the one that causes the cold feet, is that after the age of 60, your basal endothelial production of nitric oxide drops.
It drops significantly, by approximately 50%.
Wow, a 50% reduction in the primary chemical messenger for vasodilation. That is just a catastrophic communication breakdown in the body.
It really is, and it forces a whole cascade of negative adaptations. Without that constant nitric oxide signal, the smooth muscle cells surrounding your arteries, well, they default to a contracted, constricted state.
It just stay tight.
Exactly. The internal diameter of the vessel narrows, and consequently, systemic blood pressure has to elevate, because your heart is suddenly forced to generate significantly more force just to push the same volume of viscous blood through a much tighter space.
It's like putting your thumb over the end of the garden hose. The pressure spikes.
Precisely. And it is in this high-pressure, constricted state that the vascular wall becomes highly vulnerable to what the literature identifies as the 4 primary physiological antagonists.
Right. And based on the clinical data, those 4 villains sabotaging circulation are elevated blood glucose, high concentrations of circulating free fatty acids, oxidative stress, basically free radicals, and chronic low-grade systemic inflammation.
And regarding that last point, the medical community has coalesced around a fascinating portmanteau for this. They call it inflammaging.
Inflammaging. I actually really like that term because it perfectly captures the pathology.
It really does. It's this persistent, smoldering, sterile inflammation that upregulates pro-inflammatory cytokines as we age. It's always there in the background.
Right. And when you combine that chronic inflammatory baseline with oxidative stress, you are constantly assaulting that delicate single layer of endothelial cells.
So going back to your analogy, these 4 factors are the harsh elements baking the garden hose, creating those microscopic fissures along the inner wall.
And those fissures, those little cracks, become the biological traps for the real culprit here. We're talking about LDL cholesterol.
But we need to be very careful here. It is not standard circulating LDL. The research is very specific. It is oxidized LDL cholesterol.
That distinction is so vital, right? Because native LDL cholesterol is actually essential for cellular function. We need it.
We absolutely need it. But when an LDL particle is exposed to those free radicals we mentioned, its lipid and protein structure gets chemically altered. It oxidizes.
It basically goes rancid in the bloodstream.
That's a good way to put it. And when that happens, the immune system no longer recognizes it as a friendly nutrient carrier. It recognizes it as a toxic foreign invader.
So it attacks it.
Exactly. When these oxidized LDL particles slip into those microfissures in the endothelial wall, white blood cells, specifically macrophages, rush in to consume them.
But here's where it goes wrong. The macrophages gorge themselves on the oxidized cholesterol until they physically die.
Yeah, they literally eat themselves to death, transforming into what are called foam cells.
Foam cells.
Yeah.
And that accumulation of dead foam cells and all those trapped lipids is the literal foundation of arterial plaque.
And the scary part is it's an entirely silent process. Plaque accumulation operates totally below the threshold of physical sensation for decades.
You don't feel a plaque building up when you're 40.
Not at all. You only become symptomatic when the internal diameter of the artery is so severely occluded, we're talking often 70% or more, that the tissues in your extremities are suffocating from a lack of oxygenated blood.
Which brings us back to the symptoms. That is the clinical definition of peripheral artery disease, or PAD, which manifests as those freezing feet and the heavy aching legs by evening.
Exactly.
So if the structural breakdown of the endothelium and the oxidation of LDL are the root causes, how do we intervene? Standard advice was always avoid all fats.
Right, the old low-fat diet.
But the clinical data says the exact opposite. The right fats, these specific cold-pressed oils, are the molecular keys to unlocking nitric oxide and dissolving this plaque.
The data really dictates that we have to look at these oils not just as generic macronutrients or calories, but as complex delivery systems for bioactive compounds.
Which leads us into part 2, the arterial cleansers. Let's look at specific oils for vascular repair. And a really compelling starting point in the literature is walnut oil.
Yes, walnut oil, often overlooked but incredibly powerful.
The University of São Paulo conducted this remarkably elegant study on it. They took a cohort of older adults all over the age of 60, and they didn't do any severe caloric restrictions or complex diet overhauls.
They kept it simple.
Very simple. The sole intervention was the daily consumption of just 1 tablespoon of cold-pressed walnut oil.
And the results were staggering. After just 6 weeks, the endothelial function of the participants was measured, and their blood vessels demonstrated a 64% increase in flexibility.
I mean, 64% more flexible in 6 weeks.
Observing a 64% improvement in vascular compliance over a mere 42 days indicates a highly aggressive, positive remodeling of the tissue.
So how is it doing that? What's the mechanism?
Walnut oil achieves this through a very specific triad of compounds. First, it is exceptionally dense in alpha-linolenic acid, or ALA, which is the plant-based omega-3 fatty acid.
Right. Omega-3s are famous for their anti-inflammatory effect.
Exactly. Second, it contains high concentrations of ellagic acid, which is a potent polyphenol.
So if oxidative stress is creating those fissures in the vascular wall, I imagine the ellagic acid is acting as this targeted antioxidant force, right? Neutralizing the free radicals before they can damage the garden hose.
It intercepts the reactive oxygen species, yes. But the true unique mechanism of walnut oil, the real magic, lies in its specific isomer of vitamin E gamma tocopherol.
Okay, let's break that down. So it's blocking oxidation, which must mean it's interrupting the lipid peroxidation chain. How exactly does gamma tocopherol do that on a molecular level compared to, normal antioxidants?
Well, most commercial vitamin E supplements use alpha tocopherol, but gamma tocopherol has a unique chemical structure that allows it to physically embed itself into the outer membrane of the LDL cholesterol particle itself.
Wait, really? It attaches to the cholesterol?
Yes, it acts as a sacrificial molecular shield. So when a free radical attempts to steal an electron from the LDL particle, which is the event that causes oxidation, the gamma tocopherol donates one of its own electrons instead.
Oh, wow. It basically takes the bullet.
Exactly. It neutralizes the threat, leaving the LDL particle perfectly intact. And if the LDL does not oxidize, it cannot trigger the macrophage response, and that whole plaque building cycle is just halted in its tracks.
That is a brilliant mechanism. The oil restores the vessel's elasticity via the ALA, and provides an embedded molecular shield for the cholesterol via the gamma tocopherol.
It's fantastic. However, the sources emphasize a strict limitation for walnut oil, and that's the fragility of those compounds.
Right, the heat issue. If you heat this oil, you destroy its therapeutic value.
Completely. The molecular bonds in ALA and gamma tocopherol degrade rapidly under thermal stress. Using walnut oil in a frying pan initiates premature oxidation of the lipids before they even enter your body.
You're just creating the free radicals you're trying to fight.
Exactly. It must be utilized purely as a finishing oil, consumed raw, over a salad or just on a spoon.
Which logically transitions us to an oil that solves that thermal limitation while providing a completely different mechanism of action. Let's look at avocado oil.
Ah, yes, the cellular rebuilder.
A 2023 trial from the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro isolated avocado oil because it possesses the highest concentration of beta-sitosterol among all culinary oils.
Beta-sitosterol is fascinating. It belongs to a class of compounds called phytosterols, and its chemical architecture is almost identical to human cholesterol.
So what happens when you eat it?
Well, when you consume avocado oil, the beta-sitosterol enters the digestive tract and physically outcompetes dietary cholesterol for the limited number of absorption sites in the intestinal lining.
It essentially occupies the parking spaces, right? Meaning a significant portion of the bad cholesterol is blocked from entering the bloodstream and is instead simply excreted.
That's a great analogy. Yes, it takes up the parking spaces. But the cardiovascular data on avocado oil focuses less on the intestines and more on its primary fatty acid, oleic acid, which makes up about 70% of its profile.
Oleic acid. We're going to hear a lot about that today.
We are. It's a monounsaturated omega-9 fatty acid. Unlike the omega-3s, which primarily reduce inflammation, oleic acid possesses this incredible regenerative capacity. The research indicates that it can penetrate the subendothelial space and actually upregulate the expression of genes responsible for new cell growth.
So it is not just sweeping the environment clean, it is actively providing the raw materials and the signaling required to build new, structurally sound endothelial cells.
It's patching the cracks with fresh cells. And this aligns perfectly with the data. When the researchers administered avocado oil daily to adults over 61, they tracked a 40% plummet in highly specific inflammatory markers like C-reactive protein within just 8 weeks.
A 40% drop in inflammation. That's massive.
And much of that localized anti-inflammatory action within the vascular tissue is driven by lutein, which is a carotenoid highly concentrated in the unrefined oil.
And as we noted, its massive advantage is stability. Avocado oil has a smoke point of around 270 degrees Celsius.
Right, which means the oleic acid remains stable during high-heat cooking. You can sear or sauté with it safely without creating free radicals.
Now, before we look at the mechanism for actually dissolving existing plaque, the literature spends significant time detailing two oils that act as powerful supplementary protectors: black garlic oil and sesame oil.
Yeah, these two are the protectors. And the inclusion of black garlic oil is particularly compelling because it highlights how enzymatic changes during preparation actually alter a food's medicinal properties.
Right, because black garlic is simply regular garlic that has been subjected to a controlled aging process, right?
Yeah.
High humidity and low heat for several weeks.
Correct.
Now, I know standard raw garlic contains allicin, which is great for you, but it's highly unstable. What happens during this prolonged aging process?
So the allicin breaks down, but it converts into a highly stable, water-soluble compound called S-alliocystine, or SAC.
Okay. And what does SAC do?
The cardiovascular significance of SAC is profound. It has a tremendous affinity for the endothelial lining. Once there, it acts as a localized scavenger for a specific, highly destructive free radical called peroxynitrite.
So it's essentially setting up a defensive perimeter right on the vascular wall, neutralizing this peroxynitrite before it can degrade the nitric oxide.
Precisely. It protects the nitric oxide, allowing for sustained vasodilation.
And sesame oil functions in a highly complementary manner, right? Through a unique lignin called sesamin.
Yes. Sesamin focuses on the endothelial glycocalyx.
The glycocalyx, what is that?
It's this microscopic, hair-like layer that coats the inside of the endothelium. Think of it like a fine fuzz on the inner wall. When blood sugar spikes or inflammation rises, that glycocalyx sheds, leaving the cells beneath it vulnerable.
And the sources indicate sesamin is crucial for early-stage intervention here.
Right. Sesamin has been shown to inhibit the shedding of this protective layer. So together, black garlic and sesame oils are unparalleled defenders of the vascular environment.
Okay, so that sets the stage perfectly for the heavy artillery. If walnut oil provides flexibility and avocado oil stimulates rebuilding, we need to address the dense, calcified plaque that is already narrowing the arteries.
The plaque that's already there.
Exactly. And the clinical data points directly to flaxseed oil as the fast-acting plaque dissolver. The stats on this are astonishing. It contains 55 to 60% alpha-linolenic acid. That is the highest concentration of plant-based omega-3s available.
It's incredibly potent. But while the sheer volume of ALA provides massive systemic anti-inflammatory benefits, the specific capacity of flaxseed oil to actually address calcified plaque is attributed to a unique class of ring-shaped molecules called cyclopeptides.
This is where the mechanisms become really fascinating, because we know that mature arterial plaque isn't just soft fat, right? It becomes hardened with calcium deposits. It's like concrete in the pipes.
Yes, calcification.
So how do these cyclopeptides actually dissolve a mineral like calcium from the arterial wall?
They operate through a process akin to chelation. Because of their cyclic structure, these peptides have a high affinity for binding to metal ions, including the excess calcium embedded in atherosclerotic plaque.
So it's basically like a chemical claw.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. When the cyclopeptides bind to the calcium, they slowly extract it from the plaque matrix, making the calcium water soluble so it can be safely filtered and excreted by the kidneys.
They're structurally dismantling the calcification, which turns this hard, brittle blockage back into a softer, more manageable state.
It's acting almost like a prescription drug, but without the side effects. And the clinical outcomes are profound. A trial out of the University of Toronto applied this exact intervention.
Just 1 tablespoon a day, right?
Yes, participants consumed 1 tablespoon of flaxseed oil daily for 3 months. The researchers recorded a 15% decrease in overall arterial stiffness, a 10-point reduction in systolic blood pressure.
Which is significant.
Very significant, and an incredible 50% improvement in circulation to the extremities.
A 50% increase. That means capillary beds in the feet and legs that were previously literally starving are now receiving steady oxygenation. The cold feet disappear.
Exactly. And this is further amplified by flaxseed oil's effect on blood viscosity. It actually thins the blood.
Right. The sources mention it lowers levels of fibrinogen. If we want an accurate mechanical analogy for this, think of a municipal pipeline network. If you're trying to pump thick, unrefined crude oil through hundreds of miles of narrow pipes, the pumps in this case, your heart have to work at maximum capacity.
And the pressure in the pipes skyrockets.
Exactly. And by reducing fibrinogen, which is the protein that causes red blood cells to stick together, flaxseed oil essentially refines that crude oil into high-grade, low-viscosity gasoline.
The fluid dynamics change entirely. The thinner blood flows with far less resistance through those tiny microcapillaries, significantly reducing the workload on the heart.
It takes the pressure off the whole system. But, and this is a huge but, the clinical literature provides a strict, almost uncompromising set of rules for flaxseed oil.
Yes, this is crucial. It is highly, highly volatile.
If exposed to heat, the massive concentration of omega-3s will oxidize almost instantaneously.
Yes, generating lipid peroxides and aldehydes that will actively damage the endothelium. It demands meticulous handling. It must never be heated. It must remain refrigerated in an opaque bottle.
And the literature suggests a very specific delivery method for it, right? Often referred to as the Budwig protocol, named after the German biochemist Dr. Johanna Budwig.
The Budwig method, yes. It suggests consuming the cold flaxseed oil immediately before bed, but not by itself. It specifies blending the oil with a small amount of a sulfur-rich protein.
Like organic cottage cheese or yogurt. But what is the biochemical rationale for mixing the oil with dairy protein? Why not just take it off a spoon?
Because it's a deliberate exercise in emulsification. The sulfur-containing amino acids in the dairy protein, specifically methionine and cysteine, physically bind to the highly unsaturated fatty acids in the flaxseed oil.
Oh, I see.
This bonding process makes the delicate omega-3s completely water-soluble, which drastically increases their bioavailability. It ensures that the maximum volume of unoxidized oil reaches the cellular level during the night, right when the body is doing its deep cardiovascular repair.
That is an incredibly elegant synergy of macronutrients. So we have explored the vascular restorers. Now, I want to introduce a pivotal element from the sources that bridges the gap between the circulatory system and our next major topic, the digestive system.
Right, the pivot.
We need to look at the black seed paradox. Let's talk about black seed oil, derived from Nigella sativa. This is an ancient oil, but clinical interest has surged recently.
Yes, primarily focusing on its dominant active compound, thymoquinone.
And the cardiovascular data on thymoquinone is just extraordinary. In a trial measuring flow-mediated dilation, basically how well the arteries open up, the placebo group saw a negligible 0.71% improvement.
Right.
Conversely, the group taking black seed oil achieved a massive 2.97% increase in dilation, alongside a huge jump in localized nitric oxide.
It actively stops blood from clumping, too.
Exactly. The literature notes its ability to halt platelet aggregation. How exactly does thymoquinone stop the blood cells from clumping together?
Well, thymoquinone acts as a potent inhibitor. Specifically, it suppresses the synthesis of thromboxane A2, which is the primary chemical signal that causes blood platelets to become sticky and clumped together.
So by blocking that signal, it keeps the platelets slick.
Exactly. It prevents the formation of microclots, allowing for that impressive expansion in blood flow.
That is undeniable cardiovascular efficacy. But this introduces the central paradox of our deep dive.
The gut score.
Right. So if this oil is so miraculous, you might ask, why did one of our gastroenterology sources score a measly 2 out of 10 for the gut?
It's a great question.
The clinical data showed only a 6% improvement in digestive markers over an 8-week period. If thymoquinone is such a potent anti-inflammatory, why does it fail so spectacularly at resolving gut sluggishness?
And that paradox illuminates a critical physiological reality. We cannot treat the body as a single homogeneous tube. The cardiovascular network and the gastrointestinal tract require completely distinct mechanical interventions.
They're different systems with different needs.
Precisely. Black seed oil excels at lowering inflammation within the vascular tissue. However, a stalled, sluggish, aging gut does not primarily suffer from a localized immune response.
Right.
It suffers from a catastrophic lack of physical lubrication and an absence of bile.
So black seed oil might lower the baseline inflammation of the colon tissue, but it just lacks the chemical properties necessary to trigger a bile release from the liver or to leave a physical lubricating coat on the intestinal lining.
Exactly. It fails to provide the mechanical grease the digestive system requires to move solid waste. And this limitation necessitates a pivot in our therapeutic approach as we look at the gut.
Which brings us to part 4, the digestive dilemma and the fiber myth. Let's clearly define the scope of the crisis in the colon for older adults. The clinical reality is that by age 55, colonic motility, the physical contractions that move waste, slows down by nearly 40%.
40% is a massive reduction in transit speed.
The transit time extends. Food sits in the digestive tract for days. And what happens when it just sits there?
It ferments, it putrefies. And as that waste stagnates, the bacterial colonies within the colon begin producing high volumes of endotoxins, specifically lipopolysaccharides.
Lipopolysaccharides.
Yes, toxins, yes. And furthermore, because the intestinal mucosal lining naturally thins and degrades as we age, these toxic lipopolysaccharides breach the barrier and leak directly into your systemic circulation.
Straight into the bloodstream, which is terrifying. And this exposes the major flaw in the most common clinical advice given for constipation, which is always eat more fiber.
The fiber trap.
The doctors always say eat more fiber. But consider the mechanics. If your gut is dehydrated and completely missing its natural mucosal lining, adding more fiber is like stuffing more dry paper into a pipe that is already completely clogged.
It's a fundamental miscalculation.
It just makes the bloating worse. It compacts the obstruction and draws what little moisture remains right out of the tissue.
The physiological context here dictates the intervention. The real issue isn't a lack of bulk.
Right.
The core failure is a severe deficit of bile, which is the body's natural fat solvent, and a lack of intestinal lubrication. When liver bile production slows, colonic transit halts.
So to flush the gut and restore transit, we have to utilize specific lipids that act as targeted bile stimulators and mucosal lubricators. And the literature highlights a highly specific class of fats for what we can term the emergency flush.
MCT oil, medium-chain triglycerides.
Let's talk about the unique pathway of MCT oil, because it doesn't behave like normal fats.
Not at all. MCTs possess a unique biochemical architecture that completely alters their metabolic fate. Unlike long-chain fatty acids found in most foods, which require this prolonged, complex digestive process involving enzymes in the small intestine, MCTs bypass this entire system.
They just skip standard digestion.
Completely. They absorb directly through the portal vein, straight into the liver. They arrive as a rapid, concentrated bolus.
And the liver's response to this sudden influx of pure, rapid-fire lipids is dramatic, right?
It registers the metabolic load and instantly sounds an emergency alarm. It forces the gallbladder to dump a massive, highly concentrated volume of bile into the duodenum to handle it. It is a biological reflex action.
And the efficacy of that is well documented. A study published in the Journal of Nutrition demonstrated that MCT administration increases overall fat oxidation by 37%.
Wow.
And furthermore, the clinical protocols often suggest pairing the MCT oil with a mild acid, like fresh lemon juice.
Which stimulates the gallbladder even further.
Exactly. The combined result is a 30% increase in the physical velocity of intestinal transit. The stagnant waste is forcefully emulsified by the sudden bile dump, and motility resumes almost immediately.
But we have to issue a stern clinical warning here regarding the MCT protocol.
Yes, the warning.
The biological reflex is so aggressive that if an unadapted individual consumes a large dose, say 2 or 3 tablespoons right out of the gate, they will experience a digestive disaster.
Gastric dumping.
Severe cramping, uncontrollable agency, bowel movements happening way too quickly, the dosing must be tightly managed.
The clinical recommendation is to initiate the protocol with just a single teaspoon. You have to allow the liver and gallbladder systems to adapt to the rapid stimulation, gradually increasing the dose over several weeks.
Start slow, very slow.
So that's the emergency flush. Moving from rapid stimulation to structural maintenance, we must examine virgin coconut oil. We noted its saturated fat profile, but its specific therapeutic value in the gut relies entirely on its massive concentration of lauric acid.
Lauric acid is fascinating. It's a 12-carbon fatty acid that acts as a potent antimicrobial, but its primary utility here is its capacity to act as a localized biofilm disruptor.
The biofilm destroyer. Let's clearly define what we mean by a biofilm in the context of the gut microbiome.
Well, Pathogenic bacteria within a stagnant colon, the bad bacteria, they do not simply float freely. For survival, they secrete a complex matrix. It's basically a sticky, impenetrable biological shield that anchors them and the surrounding waste to the intestinal wall.
Like bacterial armor.
Exactly. And this biofilm is highly resistant to standard digestive enzymes and water.
Meaning that water and fiber simply slide right over the top of this shield. So how does lauric acid dismantle it?
Because lauric acid is a highly specific lipid solvent, it actually dissolves the lipid membranes of the bacteria constructing the biofilm. It physically degrades the structural integrity of the shield, essentially melting the biological glue that adheres the stagnant waste to the mucosal lining.
It melts the glue. And stripping away that localized defense mechanism yields profound results. The clinical trials demonstrate a 43% improvement in gut motility and a 41% reduction in harmful bacteria within 30 days of daily use.
It's highly effective. And the literature suggests consuming the coconut oil melted on an empty stomach in the morning, occasionally mixed with raw honey for added enzymes.
Now, we need to address castor oil, because the modern clinical perspective completely reverses a century of misguided medical advice.
The great misunderstanding.
Right. For generations, the standard old-school remedy for severe constipation in seniors was taking a big spoonful of castor oil orally. And our sources categorically classify this as an actively harmful, terrible idea.
It is highly counterproductive. The primary active component in castor oil is ricinoleic acid. When introduced into the gut orally, it does not act as a gentle lubricant. It acts as a violent chemical irritant.
It forces aggressive spasmodic colon contractions, right?
Yes. It forcefully expels the bowel contents, causing severe cramping. And worse, it causes lazy bowel dependency. The colonic tissue becomes entirely dependent on this extreme chemical stimulation and forgets how to move on its own.
So what's fascinating here is you don't eat it, you wear it.
Exactly. Its true therapeutic value bypasses the digestive tract entirely. Its application is transdermal.
The topical protocol. Walk us through the physiological mechanism of massaging an oil into your legs to influence internal systemic function, because that sounds almost like magic.
It's pure biology. Ricinoleic acid possesses a remarkably low molecular weight. This unique structural property allows it to easily penetrate the outer barrier of the skin. The clinical protocol involves warming the cold-pressed castor oil and physically massaging it into the calves and lower legs for 3 to 5 minutes before bed.
And the sources are emphatic about the technique here. You must use upward strokes from the ankle toward the knee.
Yes, that specific mechanical action works in concert with the venous valves in your legs, the one-way gates that prevent blood from pooling. As the oil absorbs transdermally, it stimulates localized nitric oxide production. It drastically increases microcirculation and lymphatic drainage.
So for the individual experiencing the chronic cold feet and heavy legs we described initially, this topical application draws oxygenated blood directly to the superficial tissues, and it literally warms cold feet within 30 minutes.
It is a brilliant example of targeted lipid therapy, localized application yielding a rapid systemic improvement.
We have established a highly specific toolkit so far. Walnut oil for restoring elasticity, flaxseed for dissolving calcified plaque, MCT for an immediate bile flush, and coconut oil for destroying biofilms. But the literature ultimately converges on a single dominant lipid that sits at the absolute apex of both cardiovascular and gastrointestinal research, the undisputed king.
Extra virgin olive oil, EVOO.
Within the realm of nutritional science, the weight of evidence supporting high-quality extra virgin olive oil is simply without equal. Let's start with its cardiovascular dominance.
And that is best illustrated by the landmark pre-DIMID study.
This wasn't some minor, short-term observational trial, right?
Not at all. This was a monumental, rigorously controlled intervention involving over 7,000 participants who were at high risk for major cardiovascular events. And they tracked them meticulously over 5 years.
And what were the results?
The cohort that consumed significant volumes of EVOO demonstrated a 30% absolute reduction in severe cardiovascular events, like heart attacks and strokes.
But the defining moment of that trial, the thing that truly underscores how powerful it is how the study ended.
Yeah.
The researchers didn't actually finish the 5 years.
Right. The independent monitoring board actually stepped in and halted the trial prematurely.
Why?
Because the cardiovascular benefits occurring in the olive oil group were so overwhelmingly positive that the board ruled it was fundamentally unethical to continue denying the EVO to the control group.
An ethical halt due to overwhelming positive efficacy. That is just the zenith of clinical validation. And the biochemical power of EVOO isn't just its fatty acids, it's the unique polyphenol squad.
Yes, the polyphenols. Let's deconstruct that, starting with oleocanthal.
Oleocanthal.
Okay.
This is the specific compound responsible for that slightly bitter, peppery sensation that triggers a mild cough at the back of your throat when you consume premium olive oil.
Right, the cough is key. And functionally, oleocanthal operates remarkably similarly to non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs.
Like ibuprofen.
Exactly like ibuprofen. It actively shuts off the NF-κB inflammation switch within the endothelial cells. It physically halts the molecular pathways that lead to vascular inflammation, but unlike ibuprofen, it does it without causing any gastric side effects.
It provides a systemic benefit while sparing your stomach lining. Now, the second critical polyphenol is hydroxytyrosol.
Hydroxytyrosol is recognized as one of the most potent, naturally occurring antioxidants in nature. It is roughly 20 times stronger than vitamin C.
20 times. And its specific job is protecting the LDL cholesterol, right? Like the walnut oil.
Yes, it specifically stops the LDL cholesterol from oxidizing, preventing the whole plaque cycle from starting.
But a 2023 study showed EVOO goes beyond prevention into a stem cell miracle.
Endothelial progenitor cells. These are stem cells that circulate in your blood, and their sole purpose is to seek out areas of arterial damage, adhere to the wall, and differentiate into mature endothelial cells to repair the lesion.
And EVOO increases these stem cells.
Yes, the data indicates that daily consumption of EVOO polyphenols actively upregulates the mobilization of these stem cells. It literally regenerates the inner lining of damaged arteries.
That is incredible. But EVOO's supremacy extends equally into gastrointestinal dominance. It contains a massive 10 grams of oleic acid per tablespoon.
And we discussed how MCT oil provokes a rapid, violent spike in bile, but EVOO provides a steady, modulated signal.
So instead of a sudden cramp-inducing flush, EVO provides a steady, prolonged flow of bile for hours.
Yes, a continuous, gentle river of biliary fluid that acts as a profound lubricant throughout the entire length of the intestines.
And the clinical outcome of that. The European Journal of Clinical Nutrition showed a 48% faster transit time, a 31% increase in good bacteria, and a life-changing 53% decrease in bloating over 12 weeks.
Slashing chronic bloating by over 50% is a staggering outcome. And the sources discuss combining EVOO with chia seed oil, or the ultimate morning protocol. 1 tablespoon of EVOO plus 1 gram of EPD fish oil.
The omega-3s massively enhance the bioavailability of the olive oil's polyphenols. They work in perfect synergy.
It is the definitive daily protocol.
Okay, I'm sold. But I have to push back here. Can I just go to the store, buy the cheapest clear plastic jug of generic olive oil, and just chug a spoonful after dinner?
This raises an important question because doing that is practically useless.
Zero therapeutic benefit.
Zero. The expert sources lay out strict golden rules based on the clinical data. Rule number 1, the empty stomach rule.
Oils for gut flushing must be taken on an empty stomach in the morning. You have to wait 30 minutes before eating food.
If mixed with food, the bile flushing effect is totally diluted. The digestive system gets distracted.
Rule number 2, the refinement trap. Light, pure, or standard oils have been chemically stripped of polyphenols.
They use high heat and chemical solvents. The oleocanthal is destroyed. It must say extra virgin and cold pressed on the label.
Rule number 3, the acidity and bottle rule. Look for free acidity below 0.8%, ideally 0.2 to 0.4%.
And it must be in a dark glass bottle or an opaque tin. Light and oxygen destroy the compounds. And check for a harvest date within the last 12 months.
Rule number 4, the taste test. If it doesn't taste slightly bitter and make you cough slightly,
That's the oleocanthal.
right. If you don't feel that peppery cough at the back of the throat, it is dead oil. It's biologically inert.
And finally, rule number 5, the medication warning. This is a brief, responsible clinical caveat.
Right? These oils, especially flaxseed and EVOO, work so well at thinning the blood and dilating vessels that they can lower blood pressure.
So listeners currently taking warfarin or strong hypertension meds should definitely monitor this with their doctor. It might compound the effects.
It's powerful medicine. Well, this has been a profound journey today. We started with stiff, plaque-filled arteries and sluggish, toxic guts, and we explored the remarkable repairing power of ALA, polyphenols, and lauric acid.
It redefines how we view dietary fats.
It absolutely does. But before we sign off, I know you wanted to leave the listener with a final provocative thought, a connection to mull over.
Yes. We separated the gut and the heart today to understand their mechanics. But think about this unified loop. If a sluggish gut is leaking toxic lipopolysaccharides straight into your bloodstream, and systemic inflammation is the exact thing that damages your arterial endothelium,
Then the gut is poisoning the heart.
exactly, then healing your gut with these oils isn't just about curing bloating. Fixing your digestion might actually be the biological prerequisite for saving your heart.
Wow, you cannot save the heart while the gut is actively poisoning the bloodstream. That is the mic drop right there. So we encourage you to go check your pantry today. Throw out the refined industrial seed oils and start treating high-quality cold-pressed oils like the daily medicine they truly are.